Welcome to the Two Stewards Show. If I were to be polite, I might say something like, "Hi, how are you doing?" If I were to be a bit more personal, I might say, "So, what'd you get up to last week?" And if I were Elon Musk, I might say, "Greetings. Tell me all the productive things you did last week, or you will be fired." Is that just an egomaniacal form of intragovernmental pseudo-communication, or is it a sincere reality check on where those oh-so-easily frittered taxpayer dollars are being spent? We also talk Germany's new administration, the US's new century bonds, and Canada's new train. To get in touch, email us at hello@twostewards.ca. Remember, this show is not financial advice, but it is valuable for listening, amusement purposes. And now, our report on the past week before we get fired.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the Two Stewards Show. I'm your co-host, Mark, and I'm here with the other co-host, Brent.
Yeah. Hey, Mark.
Hi, Brent.
Thing one and thing two. Can you introduce yourself as Steward 1?
Steward 1 and Steward 2?
Yeah, there you go.
Well, then people will be confused.
Hey, I want to know, what did you do name, last Stewart? Week? You gotta email me and CC your manager.
What dare you? How dare you ask me such a thing?
Did you complete anything useful? I don't know. I was thinking about that because I was away on vacation for a week, and I'm like,
yeah,
what would I do if Elon Musk said, in order to keep my job, I had to say what I did last week? It's like, nothing. I don't know.
Yeah, I know what I would do, or what I would say. I'd be like, I shovel a lot of snow for Brent because he was away. The biggest snowstorm of the year.
It was a good time
to go away.
A good time to go away.
Yeah, your sense of timing is impeccable, Brent.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for shoveling the snow.
That's all I wanted. It was just a little acknowledgement.
Public acknowledgement. All right, there we go.
And now for the public humiliation.
All right.
Anyways, we got another current events episode here. And, I know we've been doing a lot lately. We've got guests. We've had our guests on, but there is so much going on. Like, I don't know, since when we started the podcast versus now, I feel like there's just, every week, there's so much stuff. And a lot of it's driven by what's happening in the U.S., but...
I thought you were going to say our podcast. It's like, whoa. Yeah. Hey, I heard on... No. Okay, so this is...
Yeah, lots going on all over the world. And we'll probably start in Germany, because Germany just had elections, and Germany has been essentially the bank of the EU, right? And they've made a lot of policy, and a lot of countries in the EU have sort of followed German policy. And we can make fun of them. And we can say the word Dunkelflaute.
You're going to have to do a lot of explaining there. So you can jump from election to Dunkelflaute. Dunkel what?
Dunkelflaute. I don't know. If you're German and I'm butchering that, please let me know. But
yeah, we're going to get an email from Jobst. Jobst angry.
Oh, I should have asked him about that. I was going to poke him. Well, we'll get him on again next time. But that is a word. So German has all these words that describe, I guess every language has words that describe unique things. But this one refers to a day where there's no renewable energy. So as gas guzzling North Americans, I guess we kind of chuckle at that, right? But because they're so reliant on wind and solar energy, they've realized that there's days where it's cloudy and it's not very windy, and no renewable energy is produced. So they made up a word for that kind of day. And
it just goes with their Übermensch.
Yeah, that's right.
The Superman
and
has no energy.
Yeah, Übermensch becomes Untermensch. But yeah, it's like, why talk about Germany? Well, they're sort of the vanguard of EU and of thought and action in the EU.
Well, they are a big economy too, right? Globally speaking, they're the third or fourth? Third?
I'm going to say
third.
Fifth.
Okay, well,
fourth or fifth.
Let's Wikipedia that really quick. U.S., China, Germany, Japan. Germany and Japan are close. India?
I think Japan's bigger. Oh, India. Sorry, guys. I forgot about you. But I'm sure even India is... Are they bigger?
Well, this is 2025 GDP. No, if GDP is what you're measuring,
you have to have some kind of measuring stick, right?
Well, U.S. 30 trillion, China 19.5,
yep,
and Germany 4.9, Japan 4.38, India 4.27,
Yeah.
Canada 2.
So they're up there.
Yeah,
but I mean, in comparison to the big two, it's not really, I mean, they're still behind like Texas, California. But anyways, they're important in the EU. And I feel like in Canada, we're about 10 years behind Europe, typically. It seems like, right? Socially and as far as dumb economic ideas go, that's where we seem to be. So
Europe is our testing ground or a model.
Yeah, more of a model than a testing ground. What happened? They just had an election, and there has been a pretty major change, I think, in opinion of the voters in Germany. So the Greens have been okay. So let's explain Germany a little bit, right? It's always a coalition government there. It's not like the U.S. where you got two major parties, or even Canada where you've got. I mean, really, there's two major parties, right? You've got the Conservatives and then the NDP/Liberal. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they just merged
at some point
soon.
There's a coalition right there.
Yeah, exactly. But
we're taking over Germany's,
especially European politics. There's always like 40,000 parties, right? And it's often very small parties that are kind of the kingmakers, because you have these groups that are like so diametrically opposed to each other. So what you had in the for the last while, anyways, was the more socialist social democrats who were in power. And I mean, for a long time, it was sort of the Christian Democrat Party. And you think of that, you think they're more conservative. Like, they're not that. That was kind of Angela Merkel, and she was supposed to be conservative. But you saw all the policies that they introduced and what, like, especially open borders, that kind of thing, right? Which, not a conservative thing. But anyways, you got those guys. You have the Social Democrats. They're sort of the two big ones. And then you had the Greens. So the Greens were a much smaller party, but in a coalition, you got to get a bunch of people together. And so they've held a lot of power for quite a while. So they've dropped considerably in the polls. The Social Democrat Party has dropped considerably in the polls. So the Christian Democrat got the most amount of the vote, 28%, I think. But you have the AFD, and I'm not going to try to pronounce what it is, but what everybody calls like the far right party. They got this boogeyman about Hitler and all this stuff, right? And it's like their leader, the leader of the AFD, Alice Weidel, she's a lesbian with I think a Sri Lankan partner. So, I mean, like, how far right are they really? Their big thing is like, let's stop.
Far right for Europe?
Well, exactly. Their big thing is like, let's stop mass migration, which is it's just not far right, people. Like, come on, right? So I think some of the more like local state incarnations of AFD are a little more right-leaning.
Are we going into a time when people just don't like migration of people? And I feel like there's a lot of pushback.
Yeah, it's a natural pushback, right? And we have it in Canada.
Yeah.
So, I mean, are we all far right? Where even the Liberals have said we got to like really change our immigration policies. So I guess they must be far right. Anyways, point is, if you look at an election map of Europe or of Germany, all of the East Germany is like AFD. And then all of West Germany was sort of
there's going to be a
Christian
wall.
Democrat. Maybe they'll put a wall up. So, anyways.
See, history is cyclical.
Cyclical and hilarious.
I don't care what you say. Okay.
So there may be a what they call a Kenya coalition now, and I'll just share this on the screen here. Where you've got, so the SPD, if you're listening, you won't see this, but it's got the election results. So SPD, which is the Socialist Democrats, at 16%. The Union, which is too much to get into, but the Christian Democrat Party, essentially, or a conglomeration of like-minded folks, at 28%. And then the Greens at 12%. Then you've got FPD, which is... I don't even know what they are, but they were kingmakers last time around, but they're not, I think, official party status because they're less than 5%. You've got Linke, which is purple, which is basically communists, a bunch of others, and then AFD in the blue at 20%. So they came out of nowhere to get 20% of the vote. So you can see, like, which way the tide is going. But nobody wants to partner with the AFD because they're quote unquote far right. So you might see what they call the Kenya coalition is the Kenyan flag colors.
So they had an election. There was results. Yep. Nobody won, but that normally happens.
Nobody ever, no.
And we still don't know who's going to take over, like which way the power is going to shift, because there's so many different coalitions that need to form yet.
But likely it's going to be...
Oh, I'm glad I don't live there.
the Social Democrats with the Christian Democrats, still not enough for a majority, and then the Green Party. And like they're so far apart. But they are all afraid of the AFD and the right-wing label. So
right, so they joined together, and that
they haven't done it yet. But
so what does that mean for the rest of Europe? Or
well, what it means for Germany, and I mean, if you're a German and you don't like what I'm saying, sorry, but it means that Germany's going to keep sucking, at least until the next. No, they've sucked for a long time. And they're just going to keep on sucking. So
very blunt.
Well, because they're going to have the Greens in a position of power again. And the Greens have just ruined Germany.
And this is where the Dunkelflaut or whatever comes in.
Yeah, exactly. Like all their power, a lot of their power comes from renewable sources, which are lousy. Sorry, a good part of it does. The actual power they're using, they're burning more coal than they've ever burned.
Didn't we hear about this when the Ukraine war came? They're trying to get their energy.
So I still think about Trump's first term in office. We got to talk about Trump.
Okay.
His first term in office, where he told them, like, you guys you're dumb. You're relying on you're going to be relying on Russian gas and like carbon fuels to fuel your economy. And it's a really dumb thing. And they laughed at him. Right. And, until Biden blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, and then they realized like, oh, we're in a pickle because all of our Russian gas and oil is not coming here anymore. Right. Yeah. So all these people laughed at him like he was right. Say what you want about him. He was
going to be so much losing and even more losing.
So anyways, Germany is burning, like they just have to burn coal because they also because of the Greens, shut down all their nuclear reactors. Like, what a bunch of maroons, as Bugs Bunny would say. And of course, if you're somebody on the green side, you'd be like, no, they're doing what's right for the environment. They're in a recession. Their economy's shrinking. I have a graphic here somewhere that I will bring up if it works. And so essentially 2008, if we look at the EU versus the US, just in terms of GDP, and I know GDP is a lousy measure of anything, but it suits my purposes, so I'll use it. So yeah, you can see 2008, they're both around 15 trillion. US was a little bit ahead. Since then, the Eurozone has barely increased. While the U.S. is, this is even a little bit out of date, right? Because you said they're close to 30 trillion.
They're close to 30 now.
But they're close to double the Eurozone. And people will point out,
the Eurozone is basically driven by Germany, well, in large part.
Large part, right? Well, because if you think of all the countries that had defaults, right? You've like pigs, Portugal, Italy, Greece, Spain, right? I don't know about Spain, but they've all had defaults in the last little while. And essentially Germany has bailed them out, right? And so people who, if you want to argue with this chart, they're like, yeah, but you forgot the UK and Brexit. It's like, well, the UK is like 3 trillion. So it doesn't make that big of a difference to this chart. It just shows you
why the disparity between them growing so much since the great financial crisis.
Because they've just hamstrung themselves. And you would think, since the crisis that should have killed the US. And I mean, we can, you can talk about money printing and all that stuff and their response, which as Bitcoiners we hate, or as people who don't like inflation. But anyways, their economy is growing at a much greater rate. And so if you have the ability to print money, your GDP better go up, man. Like you just, how can it not?
Yeah.
Especially when it also measures government spending. But anyways, it's just indicative of the pickle that the welfare state in Europe is in, I think, right? They still argue. I read an article who said like, no, Germany's still better than the U.S. because
hamstring and pickles. I don't know. Sounds pretty good. Is that German food? Like,
with a side of sauerkraut, yeah, a beef hamstring.
all right.
They argue that Germany's still a better place to live because there's more focus on leisure, work-life balance, and all this jazz. And people work much less to produce the same, almost a very similar per capita GDP. Actually, it's about $10,000 difference, but it's remained stable. So that's the argument. It's like, yeah, but like,
yeah, we're not as big as you, but it's way better to live here, kind of
yeah.
thing.
And because you Americans have to work so hard and work so much, it's like, yeah, they do, but there's also the opportunity.
Yeah.
Right? What trillion-dollar company has come out of the EU in that time period? None. There's 3 I can think of that have grown but have moved, like Spotify and ARM is another one, and they're like a AI/chip producer. And there's another one, but like they've all left because it's stifling there.
Yeah.
But that's the welfare state, and everybody loves it. But at some point,
well, everybody who doesn't want to do anything loves it.
Yeah. At some point, the free lunch will end because they've imported so many migrants. And there's a Dutch study not that long ago that showed there's a net
trust
cost.
The Dutch?
This one I'll trust because I agree with it. No, it was an impartial study, but they're like, what's the actual effect of mass migration? And it's a net negative effect, which is like, is that a surprise when you bring in?
Well, in Canada, we're pretty familiar with that, right? Bring in people, GDP goes up a little bit, but GDP per capita.
When you do it right, like we have done for years, and you bring in people who will contribute because they have skills or they have money, or they're like promising,
or ideally both.
Yeah, exactly. But even like promising young people, bring them in, they will end up contributing. But when you just import people from the third world, nothing against them, we can bring in refugees. There's a certain amount of that. But when you bring in huge amounts of people who do not produce, like it's not rocket science. Of course, your country's not going to be better off. And this is what Europe is finding out. Still in recession.
They should just tune into the show. I was like,
yeah. But it's interesting. We were talking about this off air, right? We talked about the fourth turning, and again, why do we do current events episodes? Because we're in the fourth turning. Like things are happening.
Yeah, right? There's a lot changing.
Like in 20, 30 years, we're going to look back on this and be like, oh yeah, this is all a result of what happened around that time, and this is right in the time that the authors predicted it as well. But you can see the old guard grabbing, like trying to hold on to power, and they're not going to let go, right? So the U.S., I think, turned a corner. There's still everybody crying about like, how could you send me an email asking me what I did for work? How terrible. I mean, the whole premise is a little bit ridiculous.
Well, maybe you need to explain that quickly for people who haven't actually heard about it.
So Elon Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency sent an email out to like all federal employees saying like, please respond to this email within however many hours, with a summary of like 5 things you did last week. Failure to and CC your manager. Failure to respond will be considered resignation. So of course everybody
massive outrage,
but not with the substance of it, but with the method or the context. Like, how dare he ask, and he has no authority and all, right? So anybody who's like a top performer would be like, yes, finally.
I'm getting a promotion.
Well, I can actually tell people like, hey, here's stuff I actually did.
Yeah.
Because everybody knows in the federal workforce, and I'm sure that's true in Canada as well as the US, nobody does anything. Nobody actually accomplishes anything. And if you had to actually list the 5 things you accomplished last week.
I think that's just human tendency, right? Like how do you get driven to do something if you don't believe that you're actually created to work, right? And you're not of a kind of a Christian background. Like what motivates you to actually do something? Like if you're down on the hierarchy of needs and you need to satisfy your hunger, okay.
Yeah.
Well, the easiest thing is to go and steal some food, I guess. Like, I don't know, the quickest way to satisfy. But then like, to loaf off the system and just get by on a government salary and not do anything and fly under the radar. And then all of a sudden you hit a wall and Elon Musk's email shows up in your inbox. You're like, wait a minute, I actually have to work then. Yeah.
Well, I have to be accountable. And so, like, I kind of get it. Like, you don't need to reply to Elon Musk, and is he actually going to read it?
Well, his AI probably will read it.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, who is he to tell all these people? Like, but his point was more like accountability and get everybody talking about it, thinking about it. And maybe managers need to do this on a weekly basis. Be like, okay, I want you guys to, like, that's a really good thing to do, right? If you're managing a team, yeah, tell them or have them tell you what they accomplished. And if they can't think of at least 5 things they did in a whole week, like, I don't know, what's happening here. So anyways, that's the whole, what did you do last week thing. Explained, which it's just so funny to see people's reactions, right? I mean, you have a civil service in the United States that has hundreds and hundreds more millionaires now than when Biden first took office, right? So they're making a comfortable living, 100, 200 grand, whatever. But like so many of them are millionaires. How did that? Are they all just really good investors? Like, what's going on there? And so this is part of why they're doing the whole Doge thing and going through it. And so, yeah, people are screaming, like, you look at the total U.S. budget and you're going to cut, 10, 20% of the federal workforce. That might be like 1% of the budget. Like, what's the point? What are you even doing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, the point is you can't not have accountability. And if you're wasting money, does it matter if it's like, $1 billion or $1 trillion or even $1 million, right?
This is that real world consequence we always talk about, right? The fact that they're kind of introducing real world consequence to people's action. You did all this stuff or you didn't do all this stuff. And now which is it? And here's the real world ramifications of whether or not you did the things you were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think you would find that out pretty quick if you were a sole proprietor.
Yeah, you get immediate feedback, right? Didn't do anything last week. Well, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
you didn't do anything last week.
Yeah, so I went on vacation for a week, and now, oh boy. Yeah, I know it is. It is a reality check, right?
Yeah.
You can go on vacation, right? But when you come back, there is things to do, and there's probably triple or 5 times the amount of things to do if you hadn't gone on vacation. So I think everybody who kind of runs their own operation can sympathize with that.
Well, or you set up things in such a way that you're not killed when you get back, right?
Yeah, or you create an organization where other people can take over your things, right?
Yeah. Take over your duties.
Yeah. Germany calls that the work-life balance.
But it's a little bit like the broken windows theory, I think, right? When, who was it? Giuliani, I think, became mayor of New York. He had that broken, like, you know what? Let's fix all the broken windows.
He was trying to curb crime.
Yeah, to curb crime. Start with the little stuff, the little indicators.
It's like, don't worry about the murderers and all the very, very heinous. Well, worried about them, but don't put all your resources on that.
Yeah, and they focused on little stuff, street level stuff, graffiti, broken windows, right? Increased policing and all that stuff. And
it worked.
It worked, right? Because then people get the idea, like, wait a minute. Somebody actually cares about what my building looks like.
Yeah, if this doesn't fly, well, then that certainly won't.
Yeah. And I think that's the idea, right? You have accountability from the very the bottom of the organization all the way to the top.
Maybe that's what Musk is reading, all about Giuliani. And
well, there's method to the madness, right? Some of it's just madness, but there's some. There is. All
right, let's get into more madness. What else have we got going on?
Method to it. Okay, well, I mean, just a little bit more on Europe, and then we'll get out of there. But the GDP, blah blah blah, it's terrible. America works more. Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, said the EU could die. Right?
The EU,
the European Union.
Yeah, I don't know how to say it in French. Sorry.
Union Européenne.
Okay.
C'est mort. But yeah, his point was like productivity is terrible, the economy is terrible in the EU, and yeah, it could die, right? Not like completely.
Is this a new realization on account of current events, or is this just like?
I think it's a realization just looking at their economies, going like, we got troubles, guys. So, do they just fragment into individual countries now with no European Union? Is that experiment done because they can't agree on ways to do stuff, or are they all just going to band together and
so I guess the practical advice is
road.
Convert your euros to dollars or something now while you can.
Oh man, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to give currency advice, but if I was holding anything, it would be dollars probably. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about the U.S. then a little bit. We've dunkelflouted all over all over the EU, but it's interesting to see what's happening there, right? You can see populism is rising. There's change, and we've talked about like the farmers' protests and stuff still happening in all over.
Yeah, it sounds like there's
EU.
pushback against mass migration. There's realization that energy sources need to be like reliable and not just energy sustainable, whatever. And the realization that the economy may fall apart. And
it's like, guys, please look forward, look to the future a little bit. Don't look at just what's happening
but
now.
All these countries have birth rates that are declining, right?
Woo. Oh yeah. I mean, oops. What was I looking at? South Korea, like it's abysmal. Like Europe is bad too, but South Korea is just what do they say? For every 100 grandparents, there's 4 grandchildren, something like that.
For every 100.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. So within a generation.
So what I'm just getting at is like if birth rates are declining massively in Europe and there's no mass migration or movement, or that's kind of, hey, maybe we need to tone that down. Where do these whole countries go? I don't know.
Well, I mean,
to the U.S. All right.
So you can look at Hungary, right? And they're, everybody's like, Hungary, they're far right and they're Nazis. And, anybody who like isn't completely anti-Russia, which Hungary is a little more pro-Russia, everybody just excoriates them because how could you possibly? But they just announced any mothers, and this is, it's on the face of it, you're like, yeah, and then you're like, wait a minute. Anyways, the announcement, Viktor Orban, Prime Minister, was, he said, any mothers of 2 or more children will have a lifetime exemption from paying income tax in Hungary. And they've talked about this before, like as a family unit or 4 or more children, but now they're like, any mothers of 2 or more will not have to pay income tax. So, I mean, like there is the solution.
Do they have the income tax splitting rules where the husband can work and...
No, I think it was very specifically mothers, because I'm like, if you're
so
really
what do they
trying
want?
to...
Do they want people to be mothers and...
Well, they've come out as very pro-family. And I mean, like, this is just the answer for Europe, right? Have more traditional families with lots of kids.
Yeah.
And you'll solve your problem in a generation, right? You won't... But nobody wants that because like, oh, we're overpopulated.
Yeah.
We can't have children, but then they bring in like a gajillion immigrants. Well, what, like just let your country die. Let it go back to like the forest or whatever, right? Why are you bringing people in? But
I got to talk about that too, the forest and anyways.
Yeah, no, we'll talk about the forest.
Letting the land go back to the forest, or no, never mind. Anyways, we'll talk about that.
Okay, we'll put a placeholder there for it. But anyway, so yeah, the announcement. Like I'm looking at it, going like, I think you could have done a better job. Like, how about for the family, no income tax? But maybe they realized like that's a little much because what if everybody has 2 or more children? And nobody's going to pay income tax
for life.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're trying to promote,
or until the next government comes in, and says, no, just kidding.
But if you're trying to promote,
now you're stuck with all these kids that you didn't want. Like, hello.
You're trying to promote the traditional family. Well, like then the mother's probably staying at home anyway. So what income tax is she going to pay? So it's a little bit of a big announcement over nothing, I think. But it's just kind of tells you what they're thinking, right? And so, anyways, we've said it before. Like, it's the answer. Families, lots of children. It's not everything in the world, but if you want a solution to your population crisis and your productivity crisis, like there you go. Have kids who have values, who will work hard, and we just solved all the problems in Europe. So let's move on to the U.S.
There we go.
U.S. So I mean,
is there any problems there?
There's only solutions, Brent.
Okay.
They're winning. Winning so hard it hurts. It's hard not to be a little bit jealous. I mean, I'm not a Trumpster, or a Trumper, but anyways, they have a new head of the FBI, Kash Patel. He is, I mean, yeah, interesting, right? He's committed to like releasing lots of information. Dan Bongino, who is, he's got a pretty popular social media show. And like both of these guys have experience actually in like the military, in law enforcement. So they're not just like, some nobodies, right? They gained attention and wealth and stuff after their careers. But anyways, between those two guys, like, wow, the FBI is in for
a rude awakening.
yeah, I think so. So there's them. Pam Bondi, I don't know if we mentioned it, but new
I don't think
Attorney General of the United States. This is a woman, by the way. I just want to point it out. I mean, she's a white woman, so that only is half points, I guess. But people are talking about like, oh, Trump and it's old white men. It's like you look at his all the people he's appointed. Yeah, there's some white dudes, but there's a lot of like women and non-white.
Kash Patel.
Yeah, Kash. He's Indian background. So like, get out of here with it, right? With your stuff. They just fired one of the head of the one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was African American fella. He was a general, ran the Air Force basically, and like his big goal was we got to get rid of all these white people in the Air Force, right? So committed to, and he you can look up the videos of him talking, right? For years, he was proudly spouting this stuff, like we need more non-white airmen and da-da-da-da-da, right? And we're going to
because at the end of the day, when you're in military combat,
yeah,
the bullets care what color
Whoa,
your skin
whoa,
is.
who's shooting at me?
Yeah.
A white man? That is unacceptable, sir.
Yeah.
I would take it from a minority, but not from you. No, sir, I'm flying my plane away. Like, so ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Lowering admissions and qualifications and stuff. It's just, anyways, he's finding out, right? What's the term? FAFO? Fool around and find out. There's other variations of that, but the higher you get on the fool around chart, the higher you get on the find out access as well. So a lot of people are finding out. So he's the latest casualty there. Yeah, entitlements are huge. We talked about that. So people have said, right, why are you worried about like cutting personnel? Because it's such a small part of the budget. We talked about that, broken windows. But like the real plan. So the Mar-a-Lago Accord. So Mar-a-Lago is Trump's his place down south that he's got in Florida, essentially like second White House. But he laid out this plan before, and everybody's all surprised about tariffs and all the stuff that he's doing. But like he laid it out. So if you want to know what he's thinking, I think this is a pretty good place to start. So I mean the three sort of pillars of this plan are tariffs for getting more income.
Yeah,
and you
I
can
remember
debate
that he likes that word. So
yes, that's right. Never met a tariff he didn't like. But tariffs for increasing income, and you can debate that till you're blue in the face whether or not that'll work. But maybe reducing income tax, right? Using tariffs. So he gets it. They need more money coming in. They're not going to get it on the backs of the people who voted him in. Not going to increase income tax on workers. And if they do it on corporations, well, it's going to affect the workers. So what else do you have? Well, tariffs, trade partners, right? They're the biggest economy in the world. They do a ton of trade. Tariffs could work. Setting up I said sovereign wealth fund. And that will be interesting to see what happens with that, right? Is it Bitcoin? Is it crypto? Is it gold? Do they have any gold?
Yeah, where is the gold? I thought the gold was valued at like old prices on on their balance sheet.
But even if they market to market, so I think they have it valued at like $30 an ounce or $40 an ounce or something.
Yeah.
But even if they value it at $3,000 or whatever, it's still like 800 or 900 billion, which is a lot of money. But it's nowhere near it's not like they could do that and then pay off the debt or something, right? Like,
Right.
no
Yeah,
chance.
yeah.
Still a drop in the bucket. But yeah, maybe they do that. Maybe they keep some of the Bitcoin that they have seized. Maybe they, like, who knows what. But the point is, they want to establish a sovereign
That's a
wealth
pillar
fund.
of this Mar-a-Lago plan.
Yeah, one of the three. And like what we need to do in Canada as well, I think. Right?
Yeah. Well,
Get
it
oil
goes
and
down
gas
to a
going.
household level too, right? It's like every household should have a sovereign wealth fund. Maybe not tariffs. I don't know. Like, excuse me, if you're coming in this house.
I'm gonna tell my neighbor when I get home. So I'm gonna tariff you if you
Yeah.
need to, like, come and, you know, plug into my electricity to mow the lawn. Like,
yeah.
I'm gonna tariff you.
Yeah.
He's like, well, I'm gonna tariff you if your kids come play on my lawn. They're gonna have to pay $1. Yeah, it's gonna be terrible.
Yeah.
So sovereign wealth fund, that's another pillar, and then the other one is reduce the debt. So
Is that a
they're
pillar?
very aware. People in this, like, at the highest echelons of power in the States, are very aware that there's an issue, right? Jerome Powell has even said, like, the debt, you know, it's manageable right now, but it's getting to be a problem. It's going to be a real big problem.
I
Right?
guess,
The new,
yeah. I guess the debt is one thing. It's the interest on the debt that is the other thing.
well, yeah, and it's both, right? If you reduce the debt, you reduce the interest you're paying as well.
Yeah.
So Scott
a bit of a
Bessent, the new
snowball.
Treasury Secretary, has kind of said similar stuff, and he's an interesting guy. He's not a politician, and he's not a great public speaker or interviewee, but smart guy, and see what he does. But they're talking about century bonds. What's a century bond, Mark?
That was going to be my first question. So
It's not a new concept, right? Companies have done it, countries have done it, but it's a 100-year bond, essentially. And so I
who
think what they want to do,
would buy.
well, who would or who would be forced to? So that's, this is a little bit murky. Like, how do you get people to buy 100-year U.S. bonds? So maybe pension funds or like insurance companies, annuities, who just need a predictable source of income.
Yeah.
So like the rates might suck, but at least they know it's guaranteed. Insofar as the U.S. government can guarantee anything,
Is it going to be a positive rate or a negative rate?
no, it'll be positive, right? It would be
You're
high.
guaranteed to lose 1% of your money for 100 years.
Well, so that's the thing, right? Like, why
don't
would you
know.
ever buy a 100-year bond at 6% or something? Because inflation over 100 years is gonna
Maybe more than 6%.
destroy that. But it's predictable, and so the theory is they may force a lot of current U.S. debt holders, because there's a ton of short-term debt that's rolling over, coming due soon. If there are other nations, they may just be like, look, either you buy 100-year bonds when you're trading your 1-year bond, or we're going to squeeze you somehow. And so that's like, it's not nice, but it's a valid, they got a problem.
Yeah.
It's a valid solution.
To be frank, I don't think they really care about being nice. Like,
No,
Trump's not here to be nice to
that's
other countries. He's trying to act
no more
in
Mr. Nice Guy.
U.S. best interest, right?
Yeah. And so they have the leverage, I think, to do that for a lot of these bonds. And so we've talked about this before, right? Looking at the 1940s as a good analog to what's happening now as opposed to the 1970s, because everybody's like, oh, inflation. Oh, the 70s had inflation. Let's compare that to that. And we've talked about, no, we use the 40s. That's like Lynn Alden, who really...
No big deal.
No, but I mean... No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
I didn't come up
Yeah,
with it.
yeah.
Lynn Alden did. She got it, I think, from Ray Dalio. But anyways, what happened in the 40s, right? If you look at the level of indebtedness, we're very similar to after the Second World War, when the U.S. spent a ton of money on the war effort.
And we don't even have a war yet.
I mean, well, there's Ukraine. That's another topic.
Yeah.
But I mean, billions going there. But what did they do? They reduced their debt by at least half over 10 years just through inflation, right? So you go with the century bonds, that will go a long ways to cutting your debt. It's going to be predictable payments. It's going to be lower payments, and you can use inflation to just wipe the debt out, right? We've talked about how inflation, like the beauty of inflation when you're investing, right? If you have a 6% compound annual growth rate, like what that actually does and how soon your money will double. But the same thing applies to your debt, right? So if you have debt and there's a 6% rate and it decreases by that amount, like pretty soon you got like half the amount of debt. So I think that's really part of the plan here. So in the meantime, what do? Right? They need to secure resources, bring some manufacturing back. The dollar may go up and down, but that's just the part of like, whatever, we got to deal with this debt.
It's going to be a bumpy, volatile ride, and there's going to be lots of inflation along the way, is what I'm hearing.
I would think so.
Okay.
And they're going to twist it to the U.S. benefit as much as they can, in whatever way they can. So, if you're not in the U.S., sorry. But I mean, you can see they're already like twisting Ukraine's arm a little bit. Like, well, if you want a favorable peace deal with Russia, you better give us some exclusive mineral rights in the Ukraine. Right. And so Zelensky, leader of Ukraine, is pushing back on that. But eventually he's going to have to agree. And then it's like, OK, well, if they're doing that with Ukraine, probably for Greenland, they'll do it. And well, what about Canada? So there's, it's coming, right?
Yeah,
the 51st state, I think, that's not going to happen. But certainly some arm twisting based on tariffs saying, okay, you guys have a lot of minerals and oil and stuff. Give us favorable terms or we're just going to squeeze you. And like they can just sit there and like with their hand on their throat. Yeah, well, there's nothing we can do.
Well, we could build a train. All the way from the most relevant city to the least. Maybe I shouldn't say that.
Oh, man.
How much is this train going to cost us, by the way?
I can't remember. It's in the billions.
No, $3.9 billion design phase. Ooh, that's a nice design contract.
I can't remember what is it dozens of billions, 100 billion? Like it's all made up numbers.
Construction won't start until end of $3.9 billion design phase that could last 5 years. Now, this is a high-speed rail that will run between Toronto and Quebec City.
Yeah. Oh,
announced by our fearless leader.
Where I've always wanted to go, Quebec City. Like nothing against Quebec City. I've been there.
If you're ever going to go there, you want to go there at 300 kilometers per hour.
I guess. I mean,
how
much is it going to cost?
The journey is the destination. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's not about going to Quebec City. It's how fast you go along the way.
I don't know the train routes, but I'm pretty sure you can probably get there by train now. It's probably not a great ride because we're Canada.
Yeah, but maybe they're building it so that people can get out of there faster. Man.
Well,
we're just throwing them under the bus. Sorry, but
under the train.
Under the
high-speed train. I mean, this whole it's a little ridiculous for multiple reasons. Number one is like Quebec City. Like I could see Toronto to Montreal because they're major economic hubs.
Sorry. A government statement said the project will stimulate the economy.
Yeah, for whoever's pockets are getting lined, getting these contracts.
Creating over 51,000 good-paying jobs during construction. The gulags, they stimulated they got all the population to work in these camps.
Yep.
And they created all kinds of jobs.
Yeah.
Was that good for the economy?
So yeah, I have other thoughts on that and Carney's ideas about spend less, invest more. But so unless I missed something, I'd never heard anything about this rail plan. Like I never heard this before. They announced it like a week ago.
Do you listen to government media sources?
I go through Government of Canada news releases, CMHC, StatsCan. So like more than the average nerd, I would say. So yeah. Had never heard of this.
So that's completely blindsided.
A week later, they're like, okay, we're done the procurement phase. Like, what? How did that happen? And I mean, if you're not into all this sort of stuff, you're like, oh, okay, whatever. But like procurement is where you like find your vendors, right? And that
the
usually
people who are actually going to build and do the project. Yeah.
Takes a long time. So like, how do they have somebody already? And is it like,
AI?
Obviously
maybe they
the thought,
use AI.
yeah, maybe. Or maybe it's just like they're lining the pockets of some big time Liberal Party contributors. That's my thought. And that's a very cynical thought. But like there's no way this happens so quickly without that being the case. So anyways, there's that. There's Mark Carney and his comments on steel. Like what a What a ding dong, right?
Okay,
like,
I didn't hear
he's
about
not
this.
He's not a dumb guy.
Yeah.
Clearly, I don't know. I don't think he is. I think he's probably pretty smart. But he
wrote a
was
book.
on.
But you also wrote a book. So
Okay, the difference is I actually wrote the book.
okay.
Right? I didn't have somebody write it for me and like. Anyways, but no, he was on the CBC and he's done a few interviews, right? But there was one he was talking about tariffs on steel, and he's like, "Well, I mean, basically, like it's not going to affect the average person because the average person doesn't
use steel. Yeah. When's the last time you went to the store and bought some steel?
Exactly. It's just big companies.
Well, you buy steel all the time. You buy these aluminum Coke cans.
Yeah, it's aluminum.
You're steel and aluminum.
Like what a dumb, and like everybody immediately was like, what a stupid, everybody uses steel in everything we do, right? Yeah, we don't buy steel, but all of our like
cars,
products,
house, infrastructure.
Yeah. So like just dumb. But it's more, I think he thinks that people won't catch it. Not that he actually thinks that, because he's just trying to downplay tariffs and carbon taxes if he, does more carbon tax on steel producers or something. But anyways, it's like, well, here's something. I guess this train isn't going to use steel because that's what regular people use. And, it just, I don't know. It was a bit of it made me laugh. We were like, oh, yeah, I guess we'll have to make this train line out of something other than steel. But, yeah, that's Carney. What was the other one he said? He just had a talk out about, so again, he's like, he knows better, but I guess he figures other people don't, or the average person doesn't, right? So he's talking about operational expenses versus capital expenses. So this is his thing. And like the reason we're talking about Carney is because he will be the next prime minister. Right? They had a leadership race. They eliminated the brown people from it because they didn't like them. And like, yeah, that's a crude way of saying it. But you had two Indian background candidates, right? Chandra Arya, I think, and Ruby Dalla. So I mean, the one guy, he was pretty funny, Chandra Arya, because like he doesn't speak French, and they asked him about it. Like, don't you think you need to speak French to be prime? He's like, no. I mean, I agree with the guy, but like, no.
We were on vacation. Fly. We just went on a plane, and they all do the safety procedures in English and French. And
right.
You get a lot of eye rolling on the French one for sure. I mean, a lot of eye rolling in general. But.
It is, but I mean, yeah. If you're going to be the next prime minister, you got to speak French. Yeah. So. Anyways, he got quickly disqualified. It's interesting watching the leadership race.
I would love to watch the French debate with the guy who refuses to speak.
A lot of sign language and gesticulation. But no, the Liberal leadership party race, like you could see, it's rigged for Carney because they're like, oh yeah, you know what? Instead of whatever the amount is raised, you need to raise $350,000, and you need it by like tomorrow night. It's something ridiculous, like very short time frame, right? Trying to eliminate contenders. So a few people came up with the money. So Ruby Dalla was one. She's a, I don't know, they went through her social media essentially and were like, oh yeah, she's got a lot of, anti-WEF stuff on there, which is a right-wing conspiracy. They didn't tell her why they disqualified her, but she was disqualified by the Liberal Party to be in the race. Sure. And they want to keep her $350,000.
Ooh.
So she's fighting that. But anyway, she's a brown woman, and they booted her out in favor of a panel of white contenders. So, and like I have no problem with that if somebody doesn't qualify, but this is not the language at the Liberal Party, right? Yeah. Remember Trudeau came in, and he's like, half of my cabinet are female because it's 2015, right? That smarmy, condescending, smug. Oh, I can't even say what I want to do because I'll be prosecuted. But just that condescending tone, right? Which they don't abide by. They don't believe in at all. Or they would have a much more diverse leadership race. There is a woman in there still, Karina Gold. And I think she's just the token woman for the race. It's going to be Carney. Anyways, that's why we're talking about Carney. But getting back to operational versus capital spending, right? So his slogan is spend less, invest more. So you're like, oh, that's a good idea,
sounds
right?
Sounds pretty smart. Yeah.
Yeah, reduce your operational expenses, right? This is what companies would do. But then you increase your capital expenditures so that in the long term, your company or your country does better. And it's like, yeah, that would make sense if we didn't have a government that, like, A, wasn't corrupt as all get out, and B, just wasted money, not on corruption, but just incompetence. And, like, you're not running a company, you're running a country.
Yeah.
And this is not, like, it just doesn't work that way. And he knows that. But he thinks that people aren't going to clue into it. So his whole thing is that, yeah, we should trim some of the unnecessary spending, but then we're going to spend like a pantload of money on infrastructure projects like this stupid rail thing.
Give contracts to people we like.
Yeah. And like in the end, it's all still spending. And there's no way, I guarantee you, no way that any of the projects that they're going to spend money on actually have return for Canadians, right? Unless it's pipelines. Like, okay, maybe. Then I might buy it. But it's going to be nonsense stuff, I think. And so we'll see, right? If Carney doesn't call an election, we got another year and a half of this kind of stuff going on. And what does that mean? Inflation, I would say, right? They're going to be spending money. Spend. So, yeah. What was you wanted to talk about forests?
Oh, no, I was just saying we talked about Joel Salatin a while ago.
Yes.
This was the advisor to the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Very disappointed. Thomas Massey did not get in as Secretary of Agriculture. It was I can't remember her name now, and I apologize, but it was somebody else. But she's in, and I think Joel Salatin will still be an advisor, so that's good.
Yeah. So, anyways, he's got a documentary thing out on him and his farming kind of background, and I don't know if it's just like timely release because he might be coming into like a public eye more, but kind of going through some of his values and like his history, and that was pretty interesting.
Did you watch it?
So I watched it. Yeah.
Do you have a subscription to Angel Studios?
I know. I think it's Canon Plus or whatever.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was good, but it was. He kind of made the point that we've talked to Mike about this too, right? Like the soil fertility, letting whatever, right? And farming practices in the current state, we're mining soil fertility by pumping soil full of chemicals and, producing food for maximum efficiency to try and feed the world on this premise that, hey, we can't possibly feed the world if it's all these small farms that are, have a handful of pigs and cows. Anyways, so his whole thing was that, if you leave the land, it goes back to forest. But if you can use, you use the forests. I don't even know what I was making the reference when you mentioned it, but like he put all these wetlands in his forests to try to recapture some of the water, and he's kind of shutting off all these stats that how good it is for the land, and so what was interesting is that his approach is. Like what I took away from it is that it's a multi-generational thing that so his grandfather kind of had this ambition, and then his father kind of took it up and like risked everything, and then he took so he's up there too, right? He's like older than you or something.
I mean, that's
so like he spent his whole life kind of establishing this farm on these ideologies of like, okay, let's invest in the land. Let's get set up. Let's get our customer base. And like that took him his whole lifetime. And now his son is finally taking over and like running things. And it's basically just a multi-generational asset that two generations three basically had to risk and put in and not get a reward. Yeah. And he's kind of, I think, drawing a comparison to like world economy, the government, like our whole society, right? We're constantly trying to get something out of life, out of the world without putting something in. Yeah. And his bent is he's a Christian, right? So he's looking at God's design for things, right? He's looking at, God designed the world to be, this very complex, diverse ecosystem that human beings are in charge of to steward and to subdue and to take control of and to care for, right? To God's glory. Yeah. So in agriculture, that's there's kind of like this really easy link, right? Because you're going in and you're actually dealing with nature, and you're like, okay, well, God created this plant, and like it's very direct. And I think in white collar jobs and in other industries, it's like, okay, well, like, did God create this steel beam that just came out of this extruding me? Like,
Yeah.
it's not as easy to link, but I guess there's some principles there that like I think would apply to everybody, where you actually, like, the world is full of abundance, and this is the mentality of like abundance and scarcity, right? Like most people in society just think like, okay, if you have that thing, I can't have it.
Yeah.
So I don't like you because you have a position I can't get, or you have a car I can't, like, whatever, right? And there's always this, well, like the haves and the have-nots, and this attitude of jealousy and envy and whatever, right? And that's not the world that we live in. That God created this world of abundance, and if you even just focus on what you have been given in front of you, this is stewardship, right? Like focus on what you have been given right in front of you, and like study God's design for it, and study how you can use it. Like, and plants is a good example, because you can see, like, you tend the plant, God provides for it, and it produces fruit, right? And there's like this abundance built in, but he's saying, like, over generations, his soil produces plants that they didn't even know existed, right? Like,
that's right.
Like he's talking about recapturing the seed bank from like before the bison were on the land, or whatever. There's plants that the whole state doesn't even know how to identify, because they're so, like, they weren't able to grow during the current, like, agricultural practices that they're using on the land.
Well, and he, it wasn't just that he kind of risked stuff and like, is this going to pan out or not? But like, he actively was like prosecuted or interfered with or whoever by the EPA and by the government. So I was just thinking while you're saying that,
he played tough against them, but I don't know. I find this stuff really fascinating.
But what you're saying, right? Like, you're talking about individual people doing stuff, and taking a risk, and like multi-generational, whatever.
You just feel like you can't do anything. Like, what can I actually do? Like, I'm so small. I'm only in this one. Like, you're so finite. Like, in the global scale, even in a country or community. Like, I spent all day Saturday making that one thing. And like, what a waste, or whatever, right? Like,
I could have just bought it on Temu for 99 cents. And that's where people are like, or if you have something and I don't, well, government is the great equalizer.
Welfare.
So government, spend more, right? We're going to create jobs. Or like, no, get out of it. Just stop. Let private industry do it. Let people like you and me do that stuff, instead of the answer always seems to be, well, government has to do it. It's like, no, government.
And that's an attitude thing, right? Because if you don't want to take responsibility for it, how easy is it to say, okay, somebody else, there's a government organization that deals with this. Like, let's say, like in his example, maybe food safety, right? Well, do you think he wants to eat unsafe food? Do you think any of his customers want to eat unsafe food? Well, like, would you rely on the government agency to make sure your food is safe, or would you just try to make the safest food because the real world consequences, you get sick and die, maybe your customers, and you ran out of business and you get sued.
If your customers all die, it's bad for business.
Right? So I think in agriculture, there is this real world feedback loop that's much more tangible and much more in sync with, like, your day-to-day life. Whereas in, let's say if you're setting up a train construction project that's like a multi-year project, and like, it's just so, there's so much hypothetical and theoretical things that, like, okay, what if we did this sound study on this city about the, like, whatever, right? It's all very much algorithms, projections. You can kick the can down the road. We keep talking about this can kicking thing, but like, it's true. And I think especially if you control the money supply and like printing money and producing value out of nothing, and you can kick that can down the road as far as you want and hide it. I just think, like, in agriculture and your health, there's a faster feedback loop.
It takes a while to get the other stuff back, but I mean, this is why looking at like this train project, is it a good idea? At the end of the day, nobody's like, it's going to happen, and it's probably going to be way over budget, but everybody will be like, well, it's the government, it's experts, and they know what they're doing. Why would I interfere with that, right?
I don't understand. They want everyone to live in a 15-minute city, why they would build a train thing that goes so far? Or is it going to be a freight train to sell?
Well, it's going to connect all the cities and make them one big.
Anyways, I don't know if that connects to anything we're talking about, but I just found it interesting. So we'll go watch Joel Salatin, learn a bit about him. But maybe we'll have Mike back on at some point this year.
Maybe we'll have Joel Salatin on.
Yeah,
that'd be good. He seems like a nice guy, right?
He's a nice
Down
guy,
to earth.
Yeah.
So. Oh, I didn't. Yeah, there you go. Dad joke, unintentional.
Yeah. There's more living organisms in a handful of dirt on his farm than there is in the world, or than there is people in the world.
Oh, really?
So there's like 9 billion. Yeah.
Did he count them?
Yeah.
I mean,
he said 90% of them they can't identify or not. Anyways, that.
Interesting. Well, it's I've been thinking about this Angel Studios. I'm like, oh man, should I just get the subscription? Is there enough content? Like, there's a few good things on there, right? But I haven't pulled the trigger yet. But that was one of them. I'm like, oh, I should watch that. So interesting. I mean, if you're listening, you got feedback, let me know. We cut the Netflix and just go Angel Studios. I mean, I think they're a bunch of Mormons, but is that worse than? Is it worse than Hollywood? Probably not.
I don't know.
All right. What else? We got some Canadian stuff, but does it really matter? I mean, government's going to spend a lot of money, and inflation's going to go up. So there you go.
And one thing that I found interesting in this documentary, just to kind of try and wrap this up, is that
we'll try.
I think during COVID there was a mass. So like one of the biggest Google searches was sourdough bread starter.
Yep.
And I think when you talk about the old guard and like kind of the generation, up there that is holding on to the past and trying to like fight for this kind of failing political economic system.
Yeah.
And then you look at like the new millennial generation that's like, okay, are you serious? Like, this is just a joke. And like everybody seems kind of jaded with politics and the political system. They're like, look, I just want a bit of land with some chickens and I'm going to make my own food. And like, and I don't know. I keep seeing this and it keeps cropping up, this desire. Even when we talk to Hart Togman, Rent Panda.
Yeah, that's right.
He has the same kind of mentality. There seems to be this desire to have like, your own self-sustaining life and take responsibility, build a family, build a household, build your own food sources or quality, right? And I think that came to the fore when like all these supply chains. That's kind of the conclusion they drew. The supply chain big hiccup, and there's no food left on the shelves and no toilet paper.
I've been thinking about that, and I don't have an answer for this, but like since COVID, everything sucks. Like no, but like so doing.
I was hoping you're going to have an answer.
No, I have some ideas, but no, like just trying to get people in to fix something. Doesn't matter what it is. Since COVID, it's just like it's terrible, and it's like there's nobody has enough employees. Nobody has parts in stock for anything anymore because they don't want to have lots of overhead, or because parts are hard. Like just and this is just
there also seems to be a bit of a fad of like young people wanting to get into businesses doing like what do you call it, the influencer or like sales roles of like selling consulting services that nobody needs for big money just to get like these.
I tried that too.
Yeah. Did it work?
No. It just seems like there's been a real change since COVID, and people's like nobody wants to work. And is it because like the government? We just know like, well, the government's going to bail us out. So.
And if we try to work, they'll tax us or like CBDC us or something.
Yeah. So I haven't like put my thumb on it yet, but I think it's just a change in attitude. And, as you say, there are those people who just like, I just want to get some land and do my own thing and like take care of myself and my family. But then there's also a lot of people who are just like, I just want to stay home and like, I don't want to work. And if you dare call me back into the office, like, how dare you?
Yeah.
I want to work from home and actually not actually
email
work.
Exactly what I did all the week.
Yeah. Or I don't want to work because why should I? And it just seems to have increased exponentially since.
But think about this. If you're going to if you're going to buy some land and invest for 3 generations into a farming operation that you believe in, like, where are you going to do that? Right? Like, you're probably going to try and find the most stable, tax favorable place where land is affordable and there's a customer base that believes what you like. Just trying to think, like, there's this long-term mindset and then there's a short-term mindset, and they're not very cohesive, right? Like, long-term people want to work with long-term people. Like, the long-term farmer, the guy who's thinking, oh, maybe I should like produce high-quality food, is probably going to sell that food to people who also want to boost their health or whatever, right? And spend more now in the present so that they can have a future benefit. And right, like there's all these short-term, long-term thinking trade-offs. I mean, maybe that's what it is. Just short-term has even these
really
consulting things. Oh, if I just go on social media and become an influencer, like, I can get a short-term hit of glory of whatever, but like, would that be a business you can pass down to your kids, or like an asset? Like, what exactly is that?
Well, nobody's thinking about kids or anything. They're just thinking about, like, how do I get the fancy car or shoes or like whatever it is, right?
To impress people that short-term you don't like.
Well, even
money you don't have.
Like the increase in, we will wrap up soon, but like the increase in OnlyFans accounts, right? Number of women that are participating in this economy, whether you want to call it prostitution or whatever it is, but like, talk about short-term thinking, right? Like, I'm young, I'm attractive, I can make some money selling pictures or videos or whatever. And like, it's been a huge increase in the last few years, right? Of people doing this, like monetizing this. But like, what are you going to do in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years? Like, are you thinking about your children, their children, about your family, right? Like, you're not even thinking about children anyway. So like, who cares? Do whatever you got to do to make some money now.
But the Christian worldview speaks to that, right? Like the Christian worldview is, we have eternity already figured out. Like that eternal inheritance will not fade. So if that's the confidence you live life with, like, your long-term thinking, like, that's your long-term plan, right? So the things you do here are with that in mind. And I think, like, if you don't have that, why don't you go do whatever, like OnlyFans? I don't even know.
I mean, not everybody who's not a Christian thinks that way. There's a lot of people who also think, like new atheists and stuff, right? Who also are like, no, we need to have more long-term. And so, I don't know. We need to explore that more. Maybe we have a guest coming on. Maybe we'll get into that with him soon. I guess you won't have to listen to us.
All right. To wrap this up, I'm going to read the ChatGPT summary. Verbatim, and then maybe we can talk. So, we are living through a period of massive transition, politically, economically, and socially. The sheer number of critical events unfolding at once isn't a coincidence. It's the product of deep structural shifts happening globally. Germany's political and economic challenges highlight the fragility of the European project, while in North America, debates over tariffs, productivity, and monetary policy reveal the limits of existing systems. Whether it's the reconfiguration of global power, the pushback against mass migration, or the shifting economic tides, one thing is clear. The old order is struggling to maintain control, and the future belongs to those who adapt.
That's what I said. What did you put our notes into there? Oh, okay. We should just,
so we don't even need to write a podcast.
No, we just put it into ChatGPT and save everybody an hour.
There you go.
All right, folks. Well, I hope you got something out of that. If you think we should just put our notes into ChatGPT and put out a 30-second episode, let us know. And we'll be back. We'll be back with a guest in a week or so. So until next time,
steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
If you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To learn more about the show, head on over to twostewards.ca and explore our free resources. To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We will see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.
Nailed it.